Hey folks, Debbie Heiser here. You're not going to want to miss today's episode. As many of you know, I teach servant leadership at Gonzaga University in a certificate course. And this gentleman that I have on today, Mike, he is going to talk to us about service in a different way and how to give back to your communities, particularly in this time of chaos and fear that's happening. So listen in. There's a moment in life when we sense an opening, where the life we've built begins inviting us into something more. Not because anything's wrong, but because we're ready for a deeper, truer expression of who we really are. This is the Lit Up Life podcast, conversations for those who are no longer interested in pushing, proving, or performing, and are ready to lead from truth, alignment, and inner authority. I'm Debbie Heiser, and here we talk about the inner shifts that change everything. How belief, identity, and energetic leadership shape the way you live, work, and choose. This isn't about becoming someone new. It's about coming home to who you already are. Hello, hello. This is Debbie Heiser with the Lit Up Life. I almost said Lead Your Life, but we changed the name this year. And so we are in a new season. And I am thrilled today to have this conversation with Mike. And I want to explain how I met Mike. Mike and I actually were guests on another podcast together. And I'm like, I want to have you on. And here's why. Mike has this like servant heart, and particularly when it comes to, well, service in all ways, but in regards to volunteerism and how to give back to your community. And I just feel like right now there's so much chaos and confusion going on in the world and so much fear. I'm not talking politics at this point in time, but like there is just so much, and it's not just in the United States. And so, one of the best ways I think that you can stay in a calmness and a peaceness is a peaceness. I think I just made up my own word, Mike,
That's a
but
good one. I
in
like that.
peace is to give back, right? And to focus on other people other than yourself. And that's the easiest way to step out of fear if you're in fear, which really just stands for false evidence appearing real. And so Mike and I are going to have this conversation today about what he does, how he got to this point, and just this whole philosophy about volunteering and giving back to your community. So Mike, I'm going to have you introduce yourself because I wasn't even going to try to pronounce your last name because I knew I messed that up. But
Yeah.
tell us who you are.
Yeah. My name is Michael Bourgeois. I live just outside of Boston, Massachusetts. I always like to ground everybody in that I am the middle of three boys, right?
Mm.
So when anyone ever thinks like, Mike, how are you the way you are? Like, why do you always facilitate like peace and calm and all these things in your life? It's because, again, I was the middle of three boys. Um, Today, I do have a W-2 job. I work for an amazing software company where I lead a group of solution engineers. So that's just a bunch of product experts on a certain ERP application. And I've been doing that for the last 20 years, 25 years now. And yeah, and when I'm not doing that and I'm not trying to make as much money as possible selling software to people, I'm doing as much as I can to help my local communities. And a lot of those things have always been rooted in children, just
Yeah.
helping kids like have different exposure, different opportunities, and being able to see the world through a different lens than the one that they're in today.
Yeah, that's awesome. So kind of in that, when you think about, I mentioned to you before we got on here that I was a volunteer youth pastor for 9 years while I was an executive at Citibank. And there is something to be said about you're fulfilled in your job, but it may not feel like it's your calling, but it's
Right.
okay because we live in this three-dimensional world where we have bills to pay. We need to make money, right? To be
Correct.
able to do those things and to be able to give back, right? We weren't all called to be Mother Teresa or Buddha and get rid of all of our stuff, right? And like, or the Dalai Lama. And so when you think about that, what brought you to this point of realizing, and I'm putting words in your mouth, but like realizing that you enjoy your job, you love being a leader, you serve in that capacity, but there was something else that you wanted to do to have that fulfillment. Like
Yeah.
kind of step back when you first started to volunteer and do those things and what prompted that?
Yeah, it actually struck me, I would say pretty early, like early 20s. I was always super close with my little brother.
Yeah.
And I remember there was a time where I was transitioning out of college and he was transitioning into college. And he no longer needed me. For the longest time, like we were in ska bands together. He ended up going to the same high school I went to. He ended up going to the same college I went to. So like unofficially, but officially, I was always seen maybe as a mentor to him. And
Yeah.
when he went on to chart his own path, I felt like there was something missing in my life. So
Mm,
I immediately said, like, what can I go do? Like, what can I go be and become? Because there's a void in my life that's no longer there since my little brother had kind of moved on and was trying to chart his own course. So I immediately picked up the phone and I remember talking to my law professor at the time. And I said, hey, I need to go do something. Like, I want to get involved in a
yeah.
mentor program. And she turned me on to the idea of like, you should go reach out to Big Brother, Big Sister.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's something that could be maybe really awesome for you. And immediately I did it. I reached out to Big Brother, Big Sister. I went through the entire program and I immediately got linked up with this gentleman, Carl, who is still my little brother to this
Yeah.
day. We've
Yeah.
been
Yeah.
together now for 28 years. He is 6'3", so I call him my little brother, but I am still like the little one height wise. And he and I are thick as thieves. He lives down in Boca Raton, doing really, really well for himself. Married, kid, runs a business flipping homes, and it's just been the thing that has really transformed me because that then set me up for whatever I wanted to do next. Because there was a time where I kind of look back in my childhood and I had the boringest like middle America white upbringing ever. Like my parents are still married to this day, 53 years. Grew up in, the home with the picket fence and we had a dog and like the whole thing was like the most boring and I would say most safe environment someone could
Yeah.
ever grow up in. But then I went to high school in like the inner city. And one of
Mhm.
the things that I didn't appreciate growing up that I started to appreciate as I went to high school was, man, like your view of the world is so narrow. And like you are now have friends where majority of their parents are divorced. And you're going to a school with different races, and English isn't actually always the first spoken language, and not
Mhm.
everybody plays basketball, more people play soccer. And my aperture really started to widen. And that was one of the things I think, in addition to like this little moment where my little brother was going off and cutting his own path, that I say, you know what? I had this upbringing that was really stable and it prompted me to say, like, not everyone was that fortunate. So go
Yeah.
find other people who weren't as fortunate and go help them. Right. So that's how Big Brother happened. And then Big
Yeah.
Brother evolved into Make-A-Wish, and Make-A-Wish evolved into Easter Seals. And, it just continued to compound. And it just really has kind of like created this path for me that says, man, helping people feel good feels good. Like
Yeah.
you get so appreciative of the world you live in and the things that you have when you help other people that have the things that you often took for granted.
Yeah, absolutely. Mike, you make me think of a couple of things. Well, I don't know if you knew this, but I was actually on the board for Big Brothers Big Sisters of Kansas City for a few
Oh,
years.
nice.
And I have this desire, and someday we'll open a Big Brothers Big Sisters satellite office in the small town that I live in now. That's a goal of mine that I have.
Well, if you
Because
need a
it's
spokesperson, come and find me.
okay, I will, because it's such an impactful organization, right? Like it impacts so many lives. But I love the way, like, when you talk about going to high school, and how you lived in this kind of almost a bubble, right?
It
Like we
was a
live in
bubble.
this narrow kind of bubble of where we're at. And I kind of experienced a little of that too. I, lived in the Midwest for many, many years, raised my son there. And then when I moved to Sandpoint, what I say is it's the least ethnic diverse place that I've ever lived. So I love to go to Pasadena and LA because then I'm the minority when it comes to,
Right.
white skin and all these languages around you. But it is by far the most diverse in the way people think. Right. So I went from this little bubble Bible Belt, Missouri to like Sandpoint, Idaho. And I realized very quickly that meeting people where they were at meant I needed to realize I had a lot of assumptions.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And
100%.
yeah, and that's kind of what I was hearing from you there, that like it's just that aperture of opening up this view of, oh my gosh, not everybody's the same as
Yeah.
me, right? Like not everybody has the white picket fence and the dog, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's beautiful. But that to me, and the first law of abundance is in giving you receive.
Right.
And I don't know of any time, whether it be a mission trip that we did to Mexico and built kitchens and built homes out of cinder blocks, or anytime I did anything, even like packing food at a food bank, where I didn't gain something, right? And it's not all about currency. A lot of people get that confused and think it's all about money and currency, and it's not. Like abundance
Right.
is so big. And one of the things that I want to ask you, and I'm going to share this little story with you and find out like if you've had an impactful moment for yourself or with someone else. I was walking the path the other day and I could tell like there was something going on. There was this woman about my age and a young kid looked like he was maybe a junior or senior in high school, and they were walking down the path and they were talking to people. So they weren't walking, right? Like most of us are
Hmm.
walking. And
Right.
they were chit-chatting with everybody. And so I said, okay, here it comes. And so I kept walking and they're like, do you mind if we talk to you? We're getting ready to go on this mission trip and we're practicing like having conversations with people. I'm like, sure, bring it. I love it. Right. So
Right.
they start talking to me and he does his little, it was a church group going on a mission and does his little thing. Right. And couldn't remember part of it. And so whatever. So I'm like, great. So we parted and I was like, nope, nope. So I turned around. And I said, hey, give me one more second. I said, I feel really compelled to say this to you. I had an excellent pastor that when we would go to Mexico, his biggest advice to us was that we had two ears and one mouth for a reason. And that when we go into these places, you have to go, and it is a practice in humility in the realm that you cannot go in. And it's the same thing in business. You cannot go into the room thinking you're the smartest person in the room, or go into the room thinking you are better than them because you have plumbing. You
Right.
can't go into the room because their culture is very different. And when you go into that situation with that type of attitude, you don't make the impact. That's not
Right.
love. That's
Hmm.
ego. And so I was sharing with them that kind of concept. And I said, when I worked for Pastor Bob, I learned so much about just listening to people and showing up to do what they asked us to do and not think that I had a better life than them. Because in
Right.
many ways, they had a much better life when it came to relationship, when it came to stress levels, like
Sure.
all of these things. So do you have kind of a pivotal moment that happened for you that helped, like, shaped the way you serve today?
Yeah. I remember it clear as day. And it's odd because I signed up for Make-A-Wish on
Yeah,
September 10th, 2001, the day before
9/11.
9/11.
Yeah.
And I remember 2 or 3 days later, at the time when I was working at an architecture firm, we were all pulled into the conference room to kind of like level set on like how we're feeling about this, like
Yeah.
what does it mean for business, what's the impact this is going to have to our community, and like all the unknowns. Like there was a lot of fear and doubt and uncertainty about like how do we move forward from this. And I remember sitting in that conference room and everybody was crying and nervous,
Yeah.
and I remember feeling like this sense of like joy and compassion and like fulfillment because I was going to go do this thing, right? And I remember like a whole entire world was changing around us by
Yeah.
the minute, and there was a ton of like uncertainty as to what was going on. But in the back of my mind, I was going to go do this thing where I was going to send kids to Disney World, and I was going to go do room makeovers, and I was going to go meet Tony Hawk and Johnny Damon and Derek Jeter, and I started to really get excited. Like, man, like there can be a lot of like bad in the world, but like you're gonna go do this thing and you're gonna put a ton of joy into the lives of people and get some joy yourself. And for me, it was really that defining moment that like, man, our whole entire world is dark and black around us. But I had this glimmer of hope that I was gonna go do this volunteerism thing with
Yeah.
kids who really needed a light at the end of the tunnel. And I was just inspired. And I was like, this is who I am. Like this is gonna be part of me that's going to be core to me. And it even, I would say, you and I met on a webinar that was largely, I mean, a podcast largely about manifesting. Like
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
whole entire perspective I had around volunteerism then manifested into what I ultimately did for my career. Because
Mhm.
what I do for my career now is I am largely going into large organizations, talking about technology with the intention to help. And I ask everybody I've ever interviewed. I've run teams that are for billion-dollar software companies. I run a good-sized team today. And my number one question I always ask to them in an interview before they join my team is, prove to me or show to me that you like to help people. And if
Yeah.
you can do that thing, man, you're going to be amazing at this job. So I remember that as probably the most defining moment that said, Mike, this is going to be part of who you are. This is a habit of you, and you're going to feel great about every single time you show up for someone else, and you're going to feel and reap so many tangible benefits from the things that you put out into the world that are good.
Yeah. And Mike, I look at that and I love what you said because to me, that's management of energy, right? Like the only way to counter negative energy or darkness is with lightness, right?
Right?
Like it's the polarity. And so when we don't do those things and we feel guilt or shame because we're doing those and there's all this other black, dark, you know, chaos going on, the only way to contradict that or balance that out is to bring joy in the
Right.
world. And so I don't know. I think about the book Letting Go by David Hawkins, and he talks about how all of these, as a matter of fact, I had one of the meditators on my podcast a while back, how they had 300 meditators meditate for 30 days on Washington, D.C., and just send love to Washington, D.C. And this was years and years ago. And the goal was to lower the crime rate in Washington, D.C. And they told the governor and the mayor and the police force, and they all laughed and said the only way you would do that in the middle of summer is to make it snow, right? Like it's not going to lower crime rate. So they did this. It could have been longer than 30 days, but like 30 days, these people like spent 8 hours a day, like just tapping into the collective energy and sending love to Washington, D.C. And they lowered the crime rate lower than it had been in 30 years.
Wow.
So what
Yeah.
I love about what you say is when you think about science and how we're all energy, like it's a way. So I guess what I'm trying to say to the listeners and what I'm hearing you say is that in order to like continue to have hope and joy in the world, we have to give back. Right? That's what grows, like I think about the Grinch, right? That's what grows our heart 3 sizes too big
Correct.
is those impactful moments. So we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, Mike, we're going to talk more about some of those impactful moments. We're going to dig into a little bit about finding your gifts and being your best self when you're doing that. And then we'll kind of wrap up. So we'll be right back, folks. I want to pause for a moment because if you're listening to this, we were not meant to do this work alone. Build Her is the community I created for women who are building meaningful lives and businesses and want to grow without burnout, self-abandonment, or shrinking to fit. Inside Build Her, we gather monthly for real conversation, intentional teaching, and grounded connection with women who get it. This isn't about hustle, and it's not about fixing yourself. It's about being supported as you lead with clarity, confidence, and intention. So if you feel the pull towards a steady, honest, and expansive community, you're welcome here. Find the link in the show notes or join us at thelituplife.com/buildher. Okay, folks, we are back. Thank you so much. We've been talking about a little bit of philosophy about giving back and energy and how that works. Big brothers, big sisters, go, big brothers, big sisters. And then you had talked about Make-A-Wish Foundation and Easter Seals. I want to get into that a little bit and talk about more of those pivotal moments because I think for someone that's on the edge of, and we went through COVID where people were really sequestered in their houses. There's a little fear about being out. There's fear now about coming out of your house sometimes and helping and doing things. And I know volunteerism and giving, even monetarily, has gone down. I've interacted with enough people and been parts of boards enough to know that there's, some of that struggle. People are holding things close to their sleeve, including time. So when we think about that energy, we think about being your best self. Talk to me more about, because I would imagine, and particularly Make-A-Wish and Easter Seals too, all of them, there were some pretty pivotal like moments for you. So tell us a couple of those feel good stories. I want to hear.
Yeah, well, I got a great one. You mentioned COVID, and again, COVID was an interesting time for all of
Yeah.
us. But one of the things that I felt it did really, really well, and one of the things that I was able to, I don't want to say take advantage of, but my son was when we first entered COVID. He was probably maybe 8, and he came to me at the beginning of COVID, and he said, "Papa, I'm Papa." He said, "How do we go ahead and get a skate park built in our town?" And I said, I have no idea, buddy, but do you know what? We got to ask someone. So I found my town administrator and I asked her, Rebecca, I said, Rebecca, like, what is the process where we could go ahead and get a skate park built in town? Does it have to go in front of a board? Does it have to go in front of a vote? All these things. She's like, you know what? Like, right now, we're not doing too many things because we're somewhat shut down. But as we emerge out of COVID, maybe that's a conversation that we should take up. So I'm like, cool. I parked it, thought nothing about it. The years go on as we emerge out of COVID. Rebecca phones me up and she's like, Mike, one of the best things happened while we're in COVID. We have this, what we call CPA funds, where we have to collect these funds every year from all the residents, and we have somewhat of surplus because our CPA funds needed to be spent on things that were like nature related, historical preservation, or recreation. So she basically tells me, like, we're emerging out of COVID with this surplus of money. Do you want to go build a skate park? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that really transpired, or one of the things I think happens, is like the way that I've constantly shown up and wanted to do things for my community, wanted to do things for other people, were always like spurred on by the needs of others or the things that I'm surrounding myself by. Normally, I wouldn't have ever, like, I'm not a skateboarder, I'm a snowboarder,
Right.
but I'm not a skateboarder. Like, having a skate park is cool, but it's not like I'm ever going to go down there on a skateboard and try not to break my wrist. But it's like one of these things that said, well, because of the situation I found myself in, because I heard there was a need, and because I just started asking the questions, just good things started to happen.
Yeah.
And sure enough, we just opened that skate park about 2 months ago. It was a five
Oh,
year project. We
wow.
had to go through funding. I had to do a bunch of presentations, but it was one of those things that when I walked down to that skate park with my son and everyone's down there riding it and they love it, like, man, this is the greatest skate park around. Like, this is so cool that the town of Groveland did this. And I'm like, yeah, thank that kid over there. Like, 8 years old, he asked
Yeah.
me to go do this thing. And now look at all the people that are benefiting from it. Like, we have one skate park that's maybe 15 miles from us, but there's nothing else near it. So we're drawing kids in from all sorts of communities. And the thing that I loved about it was, like, again, never been a skateboarder, but the thing that I really aligned to as I was going through this entire process, pitching it to the town, was kids today, especially emerging out of COVID, had
Yeah.
so much structured content, so
Yeah.
much structured activity. Like, everything needed a coach and a parent's involvement, and there were rules. There was not a lot of time for kids to actually get out and just be kids somewhere, right? We lost our way a little bit coming out of COVID doing that. And for me, a skate park was always that thing. Like, when you go to a skate park, there's no teams, right? Everyone wants you to nail that trick and hit that landing. And it's really this concept of like you versus concrete. And everybody at that skate park always is rooting for you. No one wants to see a kid smash on concrete. And it just created this like culture in this community where you're like, man, this was the greatest thing that we could have done for this community because it's bringing people together in a
Yeah.
way that has no structure, and it's creating a like a bond and a camaraderie and a community where in a world where kids are so overscheduled. And I was like, this is something that I think every neighborhood can benefit from. So I think that was probably one of the coolest things that I've done as of late. So
Yeah.
that was a super fun project. And then, bless his heart, my brother-in-law out in Sweden is a pastor,
Hmm.
man of God, and he had started to go into areas of Kenya and Tanzania to do a couple projects. And he came back to me. He's like, Mike, I just came back from this village in Tanzania. I was the first white person most of these people have ever seen in their lives. And they have to travel like 5 miles to a polluted crocodile infested river to get water. It's like, I want to go drill and build a well for them. I said, cool, sign me up. So I went out to my friends, I went out to my entire professional network, and I said, my brother-in-law is doing this. He wants to go ahead and create a well for this village of 1,500 people because they do not have safe water. And sure enough, we got it built. It took 2 years, but it was one of those things where you're like, man, you can all of a sudden give people life. Like, you give them hope with just water. One of
Yeah.
the things that you and I probably take advantage of every single day. And man, you're transforming the lives of 1,500 people. Like, gardening becomes easier, hygiene becomes easier, just quality of life becomes easier because we raised, I don't know, $10,000 to drill a well in the middle of a African village.
Yeah, and the really beautiful thing about that too is then, like we say, oh, we're going through transitions if we retire or we lose a job and go to a different job. The same thing happens. When that happens in a village, there's a transition period, right? Because those kids, those people aren't walking 5 miles anymore. They're not going to get water. So now all of a sudden they have all this time. And what do they do with this time? And then they
Study.
start to garden more. They provide.
Yeah.
I was just talking, I did a speaking gig yesterday, and this woman was talking about how they gave a woman, I can't remember how many chickens, like 7 chickens. And so this woman started gathering the eggs, and then she sold the eggs, and then she bought a rooster, and then they had 16,000 chickens. And then they like, so now she's feeding her entire community, right? And so the
Yes.
bubble effect of this, like, you just never know, like, how
Yes.
how those things are going to happen. Now, there's also, because you have the law of polarity, that happens, but then you have some people that go through struggle, right? Because then it's like,
Hmm.
okay, what's my purpose? I used to spend half my day going to get water, and it takes a little time to get through some of that, right? And I know there's a
Yeah.
lot of organizations that help with some of that transition too. So, but what a
Yeah.
beautiful story, right? And actually, Africa's on my vision board list. It has been for a long time. I want to go to Africa. So,
Well, Debbie, we have something coming up too. We got a new project. It's about my, again, brother-in-law, Heart of Gold, went to Kenya, and now he is on this mission to get a lot of women goats. So any woman that has essentially like lost their husband, has
right.
lost like financial freedom and
Yeah.
some economic stability, they're doing this entire program where they're buying goats for a lot of these widowed women who are probably 60 plus because a goat does some landscaping for you. It
Right.
provides milk. Eventually, it could give you some meat. It could have other goats, right? So
Mhm.
there's this like it's this it's like a companionship thing, but it's also this economic thing
Yeah.
that, you and I buy a goat for them for $60 and it changed their life.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those things where like you step back and you say, "Man, I have a $1,600 iPhone and a $40 water jug," and you're just like, "Man, this person needs a $60 goat and it's going to change their life. Why wouldn't I do that?"
Yeah. And Mike, too, talking about that, it's interesting because we were talking about perspective and going to different places to provide what we would consider basic needs changes who you are. Like it changes that perspective. I remember the first time we went to Mexico with my son. He was in middle school at the time. And we went back the following year and like he wanted to learn Spanish. So we got, I don't even know what it was called at the time. It was CDs that you put into your
Yes.
computer, right? Like to learn them. I forget what it was called, but it's kind of like the Duolingo now, but it was
Yeah, sure.
Rosetta Stone, I think was what it was. And he came back with a whole different appreciation for what they have. And I have to say, like, if regardless of economic status, like even somebody that we consider to be poor here, like we have been born in the top 10% of the world.
Right.
Right. And so I think going to another place where they do struggle with water, where they need things in their lives that we would look at and go, why wouldn't we spend $60? I spend
Right.
that going out to dinner twice a month, right? Like, and it just, I don't know, it changes who you are inside. My hope would be that that's what happens to people, but that's what I've seen happen with many people that we went on these trips with to go do that. But I think the important thing is showing up again at that same level, not thinking you're
Correct.
better because you have the $40 water bottle or whatever, right? And it's not
Right.
always easy because we think the way we live is better. And,
Not
sometimes it's not, although having fresh water is important. I know I have quite a few people in my life that are indigenous tribal folks, and they talk about how they're much smarter than even some of the professors when it comes to environment. And all you have to do is watch nature, right? And
right.
do these things. And so I just would put that out there for folks that no matter who you help, try really hard not to let that ego come out and say, oh, look at me, right? And part of why I wanted you to talk is you have this humility about you. And I see it transfer, and you kind of touched on it a little bit into the work environment as a leader, right? As a leader of multiple people. So tell me a little bit about some of those lessons that you've learned and how that transfers into the work life.
Yeah. I mean, servant leadership is the only way I know how to lead, right? And I read somewhere a long time ago where leadership isn't about rank or authority or power. It's about like service to others.
Yeah.
Like if you want to be a great leader, go figure out like how you protect their mental sanity, how you go ahead and protect their time. How can you help maximize their potential inside of the four walls? Because it doesn't always mean the same thing to everybody.
Yeah.
Not everybody shows up to work wanting to make money. Some people want to show up to work to feel like they're making an impact, help others, grow in their knowledge.
Yeah.
Like there's so many other things that are true, I would say, workplace currencies that aren't just real currency.
Yeah.
Um, and I think the thing that I've always done as a servant leader is take the opportunity to spend a lot of time to get to know what does make you tick. What are the things that you prioritize? Because if I assume that they're the same things that I prioritize, man, your experience here and my leadership will be not connecting with you. And then the other thing that I come back to is, as a leader, you don't always have to have the right answers.
Right,
Um,
right.
and that's one of the things that I learned in all of the volunteerism that I've done. Like I didn't know how to go ahead and get a skate park built,
Mm.
but if you were just comfortable about being uncomfortable and asking the question, and I don't want to call it a dumb question because I don't really believe there's often too many dumb
Right.
questions, but like if you get comfortable with like not knowing all the answers and not being the expert, like that's where you really drive connection. That's where you
Yeah,
really drive like if I show up empathetic to you, guess what you're going to show back in return for me? Probably empathy. And we're
yeah,
going to move a lot faster together with an empathetic mindset than one of us coming in here trying to pretend they're the know-it-all and the other one trying to prove that they're the know-it-all, right? So I think that's one of the things that I've really taken from this whole entire servant volunteerism mindset is it's okay not to know all the answers. What you're trying to do is get to a better place. What you're
yeah,
trying to do is help. And if that's truly how you're showing up, man, no one's going to fault you in being not as intelligent and not as read in. Your purest ambition is to make the situation better. And I have found that if I just show up that way as a leader or I show up that as a coworker, man, we get a lot of things done faster and a
yeah.
lot easier.
Absolutely. It makes me think of a gentleman named Parker Palmer, who's an author. He was an educator, and he says, my job is to help pull the teacher out of other people. And I don't always have to be the teacher, but asking the questions, getting that together. And when I think about, I teach some servant leadership courses at Gonzaga University and how the 10 characteristics that Larry Spears put together from Robert Greenleaf's work, empathy is a key component and listening is the biggest key component, right? Like
Yeah.
listening at what we call a level 3 or level 4, not that I'm coming in to argue my point, but more so let's talk about this and come with the intention of making it the best place to work, making it the best product, whatever it is, and coming into that space with openness, but also with courage, right?
Yeah.
A servant leader doesn't just lay over and play dead. They have the tough conversations with people because that's care, that's concern, right? I wrote a paper about servant leadership, and at the end, I was like, being a leader is easy, but yet complex. It's easy in the fact that all it is loving people, but the complexity comes in loving people.
Right.
Right? It could be both. And
Yep.
so I so love this conversation, and we could probably go on and on and on about it. But what I'd like to do is we're going to close up, and I would like to find out from you, like if we went out to your streaming platform, what would be your most played song that you have?
I mean, I'm gonna have to go back to a Boston-based band because
Yeah.
I'm from Boston. It's a band called The Elevators, and it's a song called Shaking Off the Wolves. And
Oh,
there's something about the emotion of it. It's a reggae rock song, and it starts really, really slow. But then there's this one verse, and I keep telling everybody who listens to the song, for me, it's the greatest verse in all of music right now. And it just stays really upbeat, and it has like this really emotional tie to it that I just will never get sick of listening to. It's my favorite song, Shaking Off the Wolves by The Elevators.
okay. I love it. I love it. I'm gonna go listen to it because I always talk about which wolf are you feeding, right? So I want to go listen to that. And then on the same note, if you had to think about a book that was impactful in your life or that you're reading now that you find would be one you would recommend to people, what would that be?
I just finished listening to Think and Grow Rich,
Oh yeah.
and I mean it's a book that's probably what maybe 80 years old.
Yeah, at
And
least.
it's just one of those books that for me, like really just grounded me on, man, the things that you learn about in this book aren't rocket science, but it's just a really good refresher of
Yeah.
like how you should consistently show up. So that's one book that I've just recently finished. But the book I come back to time and time again that I feel is probably the most transformational book that I ever read. And it gave me so much clarity on like imposter syndrome and burning into a new role and growing into a new role as Atomic Habits.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Yeah.
you can't go ahead and boil the ocean, Mike. Like 1% gains every single week is going to get you to where you want to be. Man, Atomic Habits was the thing that just gave me so much clarity of saying no one's expecting you to go ahead and be the best tomorrow,
Yeah.
but be the best that you can be over the course of a year.
Right.
And that's what growth looks like. Love
Yeah,
the
that's
book.
awesome. Thank you. I love that
Yeah.
book. And then Think and Grow Rich is actually one that I do a lot of teaching from and I provide to all of my clients because it's so full. And Tony Robbins, all of those people, that's kind of the basis, right,
Yep.
of the teachings that are out there. So yeah, thank you for sharing those. I appreciate it. And then Mike, if somebody wants to follow you, they want to get in contact with you, and this will be in the show notes, but where should they go look for you?
Just on LinkedIn. I very intentionally stay out of all social media
Hmm.
by design, but
Yeah.
you could find me on LinkedIn. I actually have a really after the backslash, just type in SE Mike B and you will find me there in my LinkedIn profile.
Okay, perfect. And that way, too, if anybody wants to get a hold of you about helping to provide goats to women in Kenya, they can do that as well.
You,
So
you got it.
there you go. So thank you so much, Mike, for being here today and for having this great conversation about servant leadership in a different way, right? And thank you again for your time. And thank you all for listening. And we will see you in a couple of weeks. And take care.
Thank you, Debbie.
Ciao. Thank you for being here and for choosing to spend your time in this conversation. If this work resonates with you, subscribe to the podcast and stay with us as we continue to explore what it means to lead, grow, and live with intention. Let's build your version of the lit up life. I'll see you in the next episode.